I watched through the kitchen window as my stepsister Emma loaded the last of her designer luggage into my Honda Civic, her perfectly manicured nails gleaming in the morning sun. My mother stood beside her, fussing over the arrangement of the bags, both of them laughing about something I couldn't hear. When Emma finally slid into the driver's seat of my car, the car I'd worked 3 jobs to afford, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. They had no idea I'd already emptied my savings account yesterday. They didn't know about the keys sitting in my purse, keys to a 2-bedroom apartment across town that was now solely in my name. And they certainly didn't know that in exactly 4 hours, when they were halfway to their luxury spa weekend in wine country, I would be meeting with a locksmith to change every single lock on this house, the house that was legally mine, left to me by my late father, though they'd convinced me for years that I was just living here out of charity. But then, they never bothered to know much about me at all. Emma honked the horn twice, her signal for me to come out and wave goodbye like the good little doormat I'd been in my previous life. I dried my hands on a dish towel, because of course I'd been doing the breakfast dishes while they packed, and stepped onto the porch, forcing my face into the same placid expression I'd perfected over 23 years of being the family servant. "Now remember, Lizzie," my stepmother Caroline said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We'll be back Sunday evening. I left a list of chores on the refrigerator. The house needs to be spotless for Emma's engagement party next weekend. And do try not to eat all the good food. We have guests coming." The engagement party. For Emma's engagement to David Chen, the man I'd been dating for 2 years in my first life. The man who'd proposed to me on my 24th birthday, only for Emma to seduce him away 3 months later with her practiced charm and my stepmother's enthusiastic assistance. In my previous life, I'd walked in on them together the night before what should have been my wedding. I'd been so devastated that I'd driven away in tears and crashed my car into a tree. I'd woken up 5 years in the past, back in my 19-year-old body with every memory intact. "Of course, Caroline," I said, using her first name deliberately. It made her eye twitch, this small rebellion, but she was too excited about her weekend away to call me out on it. "Have a wonderful trip." Emma revved the engine unnecessarily, grinning at her mother. "Come on, Mom. I want to get there before noon so we have time for the hot spring before our massage appointments." Caroline hurried to the passenger seat, settling in with her enormous Louis Vuitton bag. Purchased, I happen to know, with the credit card that was supposed to be for household emergencies, but which I'd never been allowed to touch. As they pulled out of the driveway, I waved, with a smile that probably looked servile and sweet. It was the smile of a girl who knew exactly what was coming. The moment their car turned the corner and disappeared from view, I pulled out my phone and made the first call. "Mr. Patterson, this is Elizabeth Morrison. Yes, I'm ready to proceed with everything we discussed." "Yes, today. I'll be there in an hour." The abuse hadn't started immediately after my father's death. For the first few months, Caroline had maintained the facade of the grieving widow, and Emma had played the role of the sympathetic stepsister. I was 16 when Dad died of a sudden heart attack, and I'd been too destroyed by grief to notice the subtle shifts in my household. It started small, Caroline suggesting that maybe I should do a bit more housework, since she was so overwhelmed with managing the estate. Emma borrowing my clothes without asking and returning them stained or torn. My allowance, which Dad had set up to continue until I finished college, mysteriously becoming too complicated to maintain, while Emma seemed to get new designer items every week. By the time I turned 17, I was doing all the cooking and cleaning. By 18, I was working part-time jobs to afford my own school supplies while Emma got a new car for her birthday. By 19, I'd been convinced that I was lucky to have a roof over my head, that the house belonged to Caroline now, that I should be grateful she let me stay at all. In my first life, I'd believed it. I'd swallowed every lie, accepted every humiliation, worked myself to exhaustion, trying to earn scraps of approval that never came. I'd put myself through college while living at home, paying Caroline rent, on the house my father had left to me. I'd met David in a coffee shop during my junior year, and for a brief, shining moment, I'd thought I'd found my escape, someone who saw value in me. Then Emma had decided she wanted him, and Caroline had orchestrated the whole thing like a military campaign. The casual drop-ins when David came to pick me up, Emma always dressed to the nines. The invitation to family dinners where Emma monopolized the conversation with fascinating stories, half of which I now realize she'd stolen from my own journals. The slow, devastating erosion of my relationship while I blamed myself for not being interesting enough, pretty enough. The night before my wedding, when I'd found them together in Emma's bedroom, Caroline had been there too. She'd stood in the hallway in her silk robe and told me calmly that I should have known I wasn't good enough for a man like David. That Emma deserved happiness more than I did because she was beautiful and charming, while I was just ordinary. That I should quietly cancel the wedding and let Emma have him without making a fuss. I'd run. I'd gotten in my car sobbing so hard I could barely see, and I'd driven too fast on a wet road, and then there'd been the tree and the darkness. And I'd woken up on my 19th birthday, 5 years in the past, with Caroline shaking my shoulder to tell me to hurry up and make breakfast because she and Emma wanted to go shopping. The second time around, everything looked different. I could see the manipulation tactics Caroline used, the way she'd gaslight me about my own memories and needs. I could see how Emma had been trained by her mother to view me as a convenient servant and rival to be crushed. I could see the legal documents Dad had left, documents Caroline had hidden from me, telling me there was nothing but debts when, in fact, he'd left me the house, a trust fund that would mature when I turned 25, and a small but significant stock portfolio. I'd found all the papers hidden in Caroline's closet on my second day back. I'd taken photos of everything with my phone, uploaded them to 3 different cloud accounts, and made an appointment with the estate lawyer my father had used, a man Caroline thought she'd successfully intimidated into silence. Mr. Patterson had been stunned when I'd walked into his office alone, no longer the defeated 24-year-old he'd seen in my first life, but a determined 19-year-old with piercing questions about her inheritance. It had taken me 3 years of careful planning, working extra jobs while pretending to be the same compliant victim, secretly meeting with lawyers and financial advisors, documenting every financial abuse, gathering evidence. And now, finally, it was time. Mr. Patterson's office smelled like old books and lemon polish. He was a grandfatherly man with wire-rimmed glasses and a kind smile that had grown increasingly warm over our secret meetings these past 3 years. He'd become something of an ally, appalled by what Caroline had done and eager to help set things right. "Elizabeth," he said, standing to shake my hand as his secretary showed me in. "Are you certain you want to do this today? We could wait until—" "Today," I said firmly. "They're gone for the weekend. It's the perfect time. I'm 22 now, not a minor. I have every document we need, and I'm ready to reclaim what's mine." He nodded slowly, then smiled. "Your father would be very proud of you. He was a good man, and he made sure you'd be taken care of. What Caroline did, hiding these documents, forging your signature on those rental agreements, embezzling from your trust fund, it's criminal, Elizabeth. You could press charges." "I know," I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk, "but I want something better than jail time for her. I want her to feel exactly what she made me feel, powerless, betrayed, alone." Over the next hour, we went through everything. The house deed, which had never been transferred to Caroline despite her claims, it was mine, held in trust until I turned 21, a birthday that had passed 8 months ago. The trust fund, which she'd been illegally withdrawing from using forged authorization letters. The stocks, which she'd tried to sell but couldn't without my signature, so she'd simply told me they didn't exist. Even the life insurance payout from Dad's death, which by law should have been split with me as the beneficiary, but which Caroline had somehow convinced the insurance company to pay entirely to her. The total amount she'd stolen came to just over $380,000. With interest and penalties, we're looking at closer to $500,000 once this goes through court, Mr. Patterson said. The forensic accountant's report is damning. Every luxury purchase on those credit cards, the new car for Emma, the European vacation last year, all paid for with money that legally belonged to you. I felt the rage that I'd been carefully banking for 3 years flare hot in my chest. In my first life, I died thinking I was worthless, a burden, someone who deserved to be abandoned. Now I knew the truth. I'd been robbed of my own life by the people who were supposed to care for me. "What's our first move?" I asked. Mr. Patterson slid a stack of papers across his desk. "First, we file an emergency injunction freezing all of Caroline's accounts, the credit cards, everything. She won't be able to access a penny. Then we file the civil suit for the full amount, plus damages. I've already contacted the district attorney's office. They're very interested in the fraud charges. And this," He handed me a separate document with a triumphant smile. Is the eviction notice. You're the legal owner of the property. You have every right to evict tenants who have been residing there without a proper lease agreement, especially tenants who have been defrauding you. How long do I have to give them? 30 days is standard. But given the circumstances, the fraud, the theft, we can likely argue for an expedited eviction. Perhaps 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks until Caroline and Emma would be forced to leave the home they'd treated as their personal kingdom while treating me as an unpaid servant. It was almost poetic. Let's do it, I said. File everything, today. By the time I left Mr. Patterson's office, it was just past noon. I had copies of every document signed and notarized. The wheels of justice were in motion. But I wasn't done yet. My next stop was the bank. The one where Caroline thought she held all the power because the accounts were in her name. What she didn't know was that I'd been slowly, carefully building my own financial independence. Every dollar from my part-time jobs that she didn't know about, the evening shifts at the library, the weekend tutoring, the online transcription work I did late at night, had gone into a separate account at a different bank. Over 3 years, I'd saved $47,000. And yesterday, I'd used it. I pulled up to the address I'd memorized but never visited during daylight hours. The apartment building was modest but well-maintained in a safe neighborhood near the university, where I'd be starting my senior year in the fall. I'd found it 6 months ago and had been corresponding with the landlord ever since, explaining that I was in a difficult family situation and needed to secure housing before I could safely leave. Mrs. Chen, no relation to David, thankfully, was a widow in her 60s who'd taken a liking to me. When I'd finally told her I was ready to move, she'd worked with me to expedite everything. The deposit and first 3 months' rent had been paid yesterday morning, while Caroline and Emma had been at brunch with Emma's friends, celebrating her upcoming engagement party. Now, I stood in front of apartment 3B with my own set of keys, and I unlocked the door to my future. It was empty, of course. I'd barely scraped together enough for the deposit and rent, let alone furniture. But it had gleaming hardwood floors and large windows that let in beautiful natural light. The kitchen was small but functional. The bathroom had been recently renovated, and the bedroom was bigger than the cramped space I'd been relegated to at home. The old maid's room on the first floor naturally, while Emma had the master suite. I stood in the center of the living room and spun in a slow circle, taking it all in. This was mine. Truly, completely mine. No one could take it from me. No one could tell me I didn't deserve it. No one could use it as leverage to control me. I pulled out my phone and took a picture, then sent it to my best friend Jenna with a caption. New place. Moving in this weekend. Secret mission. Accomplished. Her response came within seconds. OMG, finally! I'm bringing wine and helping you move. Does this mean everything? I typed back. Operation Karma begins today. Jenna had been the only person I'd told about the rebirth. At first, she'd thought I was having some kind of breakdown, but I'd proven it by predicting events before they happened, by knowing things about her I couldn't have known otherwise. She'd become my closest ally, the sister I should have had instead of Emma. She'd helped me document abuse, had been there for the secret lawyer meetings, had let me store some of my important possessions at her place where Caroline couldn't find them. I am so proud of you, her text came through. Want company while you wait for the fireworks to start? I smiled at my phone. Come over, bring that wine, we're celebrating. Jenna arrived an hour later with 2 bottles of champagne and a bag of Chinese takeout. We sat on the floor of my empty apartment, eating lo mein and spring rolls, and I told her everything that had happened that morning. So they have no idea? She asked, her eyes wide with delicious anticipation. They think you're at home scrubbing toilets or whatever medieval torture they left you? They think I'm cleaning the house for Emma's engagement party, I said. Caroline left me a 3-page list of chores. I took a picture of it this morning. I'm going to frame it. Someday as a reminder of exactly how delusional they are. When did they find out about the accounts being frozen? I checked my watch. Mr. Patterson said the injunction would go through by 3 o'clock. It's 2:47 now, so any minute. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, waited 30 seconds, then played the message on speaker so Jenna could hear. Caroline's voice came through, shrill with panic. Elizabeth, Elizabeth, something's wrong with my credit card. The spa is saying it's been declined. Call me back immediately and my bank app won't let me access the accounts. It says they're frozen. This is ridiculous. Call me back right now. Jenna clapped her hands over her mouth to muffle her laughter. Oh my God, that's amazing. 2 more calls came through in rapid succession, both from Caroline. I let them both go to voicemail. The messages grew increasingly frantic, increasingly angry. Caroline's careful facade cracking to reveal the vicious entitlement underneath. How dare you not answer me? I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this isn't funny. We're stranded at this spa with no way to pay. You need to call the bank right now and fix this. Emma is hysterical. This is your fault somehow, I know it. You've always been a spiteful, ungrateful little... I deleted the message before she could finish. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear, from excitement, from vindication. Are you going to call her back? Jenna asked. Eventually, I said, but not yet. Let her stew for a while. Let her feel helpless. Let her wonder what's happening. My phone rang again, but this time it was Emma's number. I actually answered this one, putting it on speaker. Lizzie! Emma's voice was high and panicked, all her usual condescension stripped away. Lizzie, something's wrong. Mom's cards aren't working and mine aren't either. We can't pay for the spa. Can you come get us? Or send us money somehow? This is so embarrassing. The staff here are looking at us like we're criminals. That must be very uncomfortable for you, I said neutrally. Yes, it is. So can you help? Maybe wire us some money or that... I'm sorry, Emma, but I don't have access to any money. You know that. Caroline has always told me there's nothing left from Dad's estate, remember? Everything goes to household expenses and your needs. I'm just the charity case living rent-free out of the goodness of her heart. There was a beat of silence. Lizzie, this isn't the time for your weird passive-aggressive thing. We need help. Then I suggest you call someone who has money to help you. I'm sure Caroline has friends she can call. Or maybe Emma's fiancé? David seems successful, although I paused, injecting just the right note of false sympathy into my voice. I suppose it would be embarrassing to start your engagement by asking him for money, wouldn't it? You're being a bitch, Emma hissed, her true nature emerging. I don't know what your problem is, but when you get home, I interrupted, my voice going cold, you're going to find a lot of things have changed. I suggest you start thinking about where you're going to live, Emma, both of you. I hung up before she could respond. Jenna was staring at me with awe. Damn, Lizzie, that was ice cold. I'm so proud I could cry. I've had 3 years to practice, I said. 3 years of imagining this moment. It feels even better than I thought it would. My phone immediately started ringing again. Caroline, Emma, back and forth like a frantic relay. I turned the ringer off and tossed the phone aside. So what now? Jenna asked. Now that... I said, we wait for them to make their way home. Without my car, since I'm going to report it stolen if they're not back by tonight. And we wait for them to walk into a house that they no longer control. You changed the locks? Locksmith is coming at 5. Mr. Patterson helped me find one who was discreet and fast. By the time Caroline and Emma get back tomorrow, I'm guessing they'll find a way to salvage at least tonight at the spa. Caroline's too proud to come home immediately. They won't be able to get in, and there will be a nice eviction notice taped to the door explaining exactly why. Jenna poured us each a glass of champagne. To Elizabeth Morrison, she said, raising her glass. Survivor, badass, future CEO of her own life. To the second chance I never thought I'd get, I said, clinking my glass against hers. And to making sure they pay for every single thing they did to me. We drank, and I felt the effervescent bubbles burst on my tongue like tiny celebrations. This was just the beginning. The locksmith arrived precisely at 5, a weathered man named Joe who asked no questions and did efficient work. I had him change the locks on every entrance, front door, back door, side door leading to the garage, even the old cellar entrance. I had new keys made, Exactly 3 sets. One for me, one for Jenna, and one for Mr. Patterson to hold in case of emergency. While Joe worked, I walked through the house with a new perspective. In my first life, I'd seen it as Caroline's domain, a place where I was tolerated at best. Now I saw it for what it was, my inheritance, my birthright, my father's legacy to me. It was a beautiful house, honestly. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen with granite counters that Dad had installed the year before he died. Hardwood floors throughout, a finished basement, a 2-car garage. In this neighborhood, it was worth at least $650,000, probably more. And Caroline had tried to convince me she was doing me a favor by letting me sleep in the maid's room. I went to Emma's bedroom, the master suite with the ensuite bathroom and walk-in closet. Her things were everywhere. Designer clothes spilling out of the closet, makeup scattered across it. The vanity, expensive shoes in neat rows. The engagement dress she'd had custom made was hanging on the closet door in a garment bag, probably costing more than I'd earned in 6 months of part-time work. In my first life, Emma had worn a different engagement dress. I remembered because she'd made me come shopping with her and Caroline, forced me to sit outside the dressing room and validate every choice while they criticized everything about me, from my hair to my weight to my unfortunate fashion sense. She'd chosen a blush pink gown that day, something soft and romantic. This time around, she'd gone with white. Pure white, like a wedding dress, because Emma had never understood the concept of restraint or appropriate timing. Or maybe she'd chosen white because she knew it would be another way to overshadow me, another way to claim the spotlight. I took a photo of the dress. I'd need documentation of everything valuable in the house for insurance purposes. And because I wanted evidence of exactly how much money they'd spent, money that should have been mine. Caroline's room was next. It was filled with luxury items, expensive perfumes, designer handbags, jewelry boxes overflowing with pieces I'd never seen her wear. I opened her laptop. Password protected, but I knew the password. I'd installed keylogger software on her computer 6 months ago, the same software I'd used on Emma's laptop. I had copies of every email, every document, every search history. That was how I'd known about Emma's affair with David in this timeline before it could progress beyond flirtation. I'd seen the Facebook messages, watched Emma carefully building the connection while I was still dating him. This time, I'd broken up with David first, calmly and cleanly, telling him I didn't think we were compatible. He'd been confused but accepting. And then I'd watched from a distance as Emma had immediately swooped in, thinking she'd won. She had no idea I'd let her win, that I'd handed David over like a consolation prize because I'd learned in my previous life that he was exactly the kind of man who could be stolen. I'd learned that he was weak and vain and easily manipulated, qualities that meant I was better off without him. Emma was welcome to him. They deserved each other. I found Caroline's hidden safe behind a painting in her closet. Of course she thought she was clever. I'd cracked the code months ago, Dad's birthday, because she was exactly that unoriginal. Inside were stacks of cash, probably $20,000 at least, and my father's actual will. The real will, not the fake one she'd probably destroyed or hidden. This one clearly stated that the house was mine, that the trust fund was mine, that everything, except a small monetary gift, was mine. Dad had provided for Caroline, $50,000 in a lump sum, but everything else was meant for his daughter. I took photos of every page, then locked the safe again. Mr. Patterson already had copies, but I wanted my own insurance. All done, Joe called from downstairs. You want to test them all? I went down and tried each new lock with my shiny new keys. They worked perfectly, smooth and secure. Joe handed me a receipt and the spare keys, and I paid him in cash from my own carefully hoarded savings. After he left, I stood in the entryway of my house, and felt a sense of power I'd never experienced before. This was mine. I was taking it back, and there was nothing Caroline or Emma could do to stop me. I spent the evening methodically packing up everything that belonged to me. It wasn't much. Caroline and Emma had claimed most of the good items in the house, and I'd learned not to get attached to possessions that could be taken or destroyed on a whim. But I had books, some clothes, a few pieces of jewelry my father had given me that I'd hidden away. I had my laptop and my phone and my documents. I packed it all into boxes that I'd bought and stored at Jenna's place weeks ago, preparing for this moment. Then I loaded everything into a rideshare car, not trusting my Honda Civic since they were still using it, and moved it all to my new apartment. By midnight, I was sleeping on an air mattress in my new bedroom, alone and free for the first time in 6 years. I woke up Saturday morning to 17 missed calls and 34 text messages. Most were from Caroline and Emma, but there were also messages from Emma's friends, from David, even from one of Caroline's book club ladies, all asking variations of the same question. What was going on? Why was I being difficult? Where was I? The messages from Caroline had evolved from angry to threatening to almost pleading. Elizabeth, I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, but you need to come home and explain yourself right now. We had to take a taxi back to the city. Do you know how expensive that was? You're going to pay us back for that. The locks are changed. Elizabeth, this is illegal. I'm calling the police. The police won't help because apparently there's been some kind of legal action taken. What did you do? Call me immediately. Fine, don't call. But when we get inside that house, you're going to regret this. I've been patient with you, but my patience has limits. Elizabeth, please, can we just talk about this? I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding. That last one had come through at 3 a.m. I could picture Caroline probably sitting in some hotel room they'd booked with Emma's emergency credit card, the one I hadn't known about, but which was maxed out according to the financial records Mr. Patterson had obtained. Slowly realizing that she'd lost control. I made myself coffee in my new kitchen using supplies Jenna had brought over, and I composed a single text message to send to both of them. Caroline and Emma, you are no longer welcome at the property located at 2547 Oakmont Drive. Formal eviction proceedings have been initiated, and you have 14 days to remove your belongings. All financial assets that were illegally obtained from my inheritance have been frozen pending legal action. If you have questions, you can contact my attorney, Robert Patterson, at the following number. Phone number. Do not contact me directly. Any further communication should go through legal channels. I hit send and immediately blocked both numbers. Then I forwarded all of their threatening messages to Mr. Patterson with a note. Documentation of harassment. Let me know if we need to file for a restraining order. His response came quickly. Already drafting it. The judge is very sympathetic to your case. How are you holding up? Better than I've felt in years, I typed back. Thank you for everything. Your father was my friend, he replied. I'm sorry I didn't know what Caroline was doing to you sooner, but I'm glad you found me again. We're going to make this right, Elizabeth. I spent the rest of Saturday shopping for furniture. Nothing extravagant. I had to be careful with my remaining money, but a real bed, a small couch, a kitchen table and chairs. I bought them at discount stores and arranged for delivery next week. Jenna came over and helped me assemble a bookshelf I'd gotten from IKEA, and we ordered pizza and watched old movies on my laptop. It was the best Saturday I'd had in either lifetime. Sunday morning, I woke up to an email from Mr. Patterson with the subject line, "You need to see this." Attached was a police report. Caroline had tried to break into the house Saturday night. She'd attempted to jimmy open a window and had set off the security alarm, the one I'd had installed and activated Friday evening, another detail I'd kept secret. The police had arrived to find Caroline screaming at them that she lived there and had every right to enter. They'd politely informed her that according to the property records, she did not live there, that the owner had filed an eviction notice and she was now trespassing. They'd let her go with a warning, but if she tried again, she'd be arrested. This helps our case, Mr. Patterson wrote, shows consciousness of wrongdoing. Also, I have news. David Chen contacted my office yesterday asking questions about Emma's inheritance. Apparently, Caroline told him that Emma was an heiress and would be inheriting the house and estate. He's now having second thoughts about the engagement. Thought you'd want to know. I laughed out loud at that. Of course, Caroline had lied to David about Emma's prospects. Of course, she'd tried to secure Emma's marriage by promising wealth that didn't exist. And of course, David was shallow enough to reconsider when he learned the truth. Emma was welcome to fight for him. She could have him and his conditional love and his wandering eye. I had something better, my freedom. The next 2 weeks moved like a beautiful, terrible ballet of justice. Every day brought new revelations, new victories, new evidence of exactly how deep the fraud had gone. Mr. Patterson filed the civil suit on Monday, and it made a small splash in the local news. Local woman sues stepmother for $500K in estate fraud. The article was short but damning, laying out the basic facts. Deceased father, young heir, unscrupulous stepmother, hidden documents, embezzlement. My phone exploded with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Relatives on my father's side who Caroline had gradually cut me off from. Old family friends who'd wondered where I'd disappeared to. Even some of Emma's friends, sensing which way the wind was blowing, trying to distance themselves from her. I responded to the relatives and friends cautiously. I'd learned not to trust easily, but I let them know I was okay, that I was finally standing up for myself, that I appreciated their concern. On Tuesday, the district attorney's office filed criminal charges against Caroline for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. That made bigger news. Stepmother charged with defrauding stepdaughter of nearly $500,000 estate. The story included Caroline's booking photo, her face twisted in rage, and I stared at it for a long time, remembering every cruel word, every humiliation, every moment she'd made me feel worthless. Emma avoided charges by claiming she hadn't known what her mother was doing. It was probably true. Emma was self-centered and cruel, but she wasn't the mastermind. She was just the spoiled princess who'd been raised to believe she deserved everything, while I deserved nothing. Still, her reputation was destroyed by association, and the engagement party was quietly canceled. David, I heard through mutual friends, had broken up with Emma 3 days after the news broke. Exactly as shallow as I'd remembered. On Wednesday, Caroline tried to contact me through my aunt, my father's sister, begging for a chance to explain, to make things right. She says it was all a misunderstanding, Aunt Marie told me on the phone. She says she was just trying to keep everything together after your father died, and maybe she made some mistakes, but she never meant to hurt you. Did she mention the forged signatures? I asked calmly. Or the fake rental agreements? Or the 3 years of lying about the estate? No, Aunt Marie admitted. Lizzie, honey, I believe you. I always thought something was off about how she treated you. Your father would be so proud of you for standing up for yourself. That made me cry, hearing those words. I'd needed to hear them in my first life and never had. Now, in this second chance, I finally understood that I deserved them. On Thursday, Caroline and Emma moved their belongings out of the house. They'd found a small apartment across town, something they could barely afford with Emma's part-time retail job. And whatever Caroline had managed to hide from the asset freeze, I wasn't there for the move. I'd given them specific hours when they could access the property with a court-appointed supervisor. But the supervisor reported that Caroline had sobbed the entire time while Emma had packed in stony silence. Good, I thought. Let them feel it. Let them understand what they took from me. On Friday, exactly 2 weeks after I'd filed the eviction notice, I changed my phone number. I didn't want to be reachable by them anymore. I didn't want their apologies or their excuses or their attempts to manipulate me back into their control. I wanted them gone from my life completely. That evening, I walked into my house, empty of their presence, empty of their poison, and I stood in the living room and breathed in the silence. It smelled clean, fresh, mine. Jenna arrived an hour later with champagne and a housewarming gift, a beautiful framed photo of my father and me from when I was 15 before he died, both of us laughing at some joke I couldn't remember. I got it from your Aunt Marie, Jenna explained. She thought you should have it. I hung it over the fireplace and I felt my father's presence in the house again, warm and proud and protective. I did it, Dad, I whispered. I took back what you meant for me. I'm sorry it took so long. The civil case took 3 months to wind through the courts, but the outcome was never in doubt. The evidence was overwhelming. The forensic accountant's testimony was damning, and Caroline's lawyer, a public defender since all her assets were frozen, could barely mount a defense. The judge awarded me $523,000 in restitution, including interest, penalties, and legal fees. Caroline would be paying me back for the rest of her life, likely through wage garnishment since she'd now have to find actual employment. The criminal case was still pending, but the DA was confident about a conviction. Caroline was looking at 2 to 5 years in prison for the fraud charges. Emma disappeared from social media entirely. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to another state, trying to start over where nobody knew her as the daughter of the woman who'd stolen from her stepsister. I felt a small twinge of something, not quite pity, but acknowledgement that she'd been raised by a snake and had become one herself. Maybe someday she'd learn to be better, maybe not. I didn't care anymore. She was no longer my problem. With the settlement money, I paid off my student loans completely. Loans I'd taken out unnecessarily because Caroline had convinced me there was no money for college when there had been a college fund all along. I put a significant amount into investments, following advice from a financial advisor Mr. Patterson recommended. I donated $10,000 to a charity that helped young people escaping abusive family situations. And I renovated the house. I repainted every room, erasing the color choices Caroline had made. I replaced the furniture they'd chosen with pieces I loved. I turned Emma's former bedroom into a home office, turned Caroline's former bedroom into a guest room for when Aunt Marie or other relatives visited. I made it mine in every way possible. In my first life, I died at 24, thinking I was unloved and worthless and alone. In this life, at 23, I was wealthy, independent, and surrounded by people who actually cared about me. I'd reclaimed my inheritance, my dignity, and my future. 6 months after the eviction, I graduated from university with highest honors. Aunt Marie and several of my father's cousins came to the ceremony cheering when I crossed the stage to receive my diploma. Mr. Patterson was there too, dabbing at his eyes with a handkerchief when I received an award for outstanding achievement in my major. Afterward, we all went back to my house, for a celebration. I'd hired a small catering company, and we ate good food and drank good wine, and people told stories about my father, helping me remember the man he'd been before Caroline had tried to erase his memory and legacy. "He'd be so proud of you, Lizzie," Aunt Marie said, pulling me aside as the party was winding down. "Not just because you fought back, though that was brave and necessary, but because you didn't let what they did to you make you cruel. You could have been vindictive. You could have tried to destroy them the way they tried to destroy you, but you just took back what was yours and moved on. That takes character, honey. That takes real strength." I hugged her tightly, breathing in her familiar perfume. "I just wanted my life back," I said. "I wanted what Dad meant for me to have." "Well, you got it," she said firmly. "And you're going to do amazing things with it." "I know you are." That night, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up the last of the party dishes, I stood at the kitchen sink, the same sink where I'd washed dishes countless times as an unpaid servant, and I looked out the window at the backyard. The garden lights were on, illuminating the flower beds I'd planted last month, bringing color and life back to spaces Caroline had let go to weeds. I thought about my first life, about the pain and the humiliation and the eventual tragedy. I thought about waking up 5 years in the past with a second chance I'd never expected. I thought about every choice I'd made differently this time, every moment I'd stood up for myself instead of accepting the lies they fed me. And I thought about the future stretching out ahead of me, full of possibility now that I'd reclaimed it. I heard a knock at the door and checked the security camera on my phone, another upgrade I'd made. It was Jenna, holding a bottle of wine and grinning at the camera. "Forgot to say congratulations properly," her voice came through the intercom. "Open up, graduate." I laughed and buzzed her in, and she burst into the kitchen with her characteristic energy, wrapping me in a hug. "I'm so fucking proud of you," she said. "You know that, right? You took your life back. You won." "We won," I corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." "Okay, we won. Now let's celebrate properly." I brought the good wine, not that cheap stuff from earlier. We sat on the back patio as the sun set, drinking wine and talking about everything and nothing. We talked about grad school. I'd been accepted to a prestigious MBA program with a full scholarship. We talked about Jenna's new job at a tech startup. We talked about traveling, about dreams, about all the things we wanted to do now that we were free to do them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been reborn?" Jenna asked quietly. "Like, what would have happened to you if you just kept going in your first life?" I was silent for a moment, remembering the crash, the darkness, the overwhelming sense of failure and despair that had consumed me in those final moments. "I would have died," I said simply. "They would have killed me, not directly, but through neglect and cruelty and slowly crushing my spirit until I couldn't take it anymore. I would have died, and Caroline would have probably found some way to claim whatever was left of my inheritance. And Emma would have married David and lived her life without ever facing consequences for what she helped her mother do to me. But that didn't happen, Jenna said firmly. Yarn, you're here. You survived. You won. I'm here, I agreed, raising my glass. To second chances. And to making them count. We clinked glasses as the stars began to appear overhead, and I felt something settle in my chest. Not quite closure because the wounds were still healing, but something close. Peace, maybe. Or the beginning of it. A year after the eviction, I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. My investments had performed well, growing my wealth beyond the initial settlement. I'd started a small consulting business, helping other young people navigate complicated estate and inheritance issues, using my experience to prevent others from suffering what I'd endured. The business was successful enough that I'd hired 2 part-time employees, and we'd helped dozens of people recover assets that had been stolen or hidden by unscrupulous family members. Mr. Patterson had become a mentor and friend, introducing me to other estate lawyers and financial advisors who shared our mission of protecting vulnerable heirs. Together, we'd started a nonprofit organization offering free legal services to young people in situations like mine, those who'd lost parents and were being exploited by the very people who should have protected them. The house had become a gathering place for real family and true friends. Aunt Marie visited monthly, and my father's cousins stopped by regularly. Jenna had a standing invitation to dinner every Sunday. I'd even started dating someone, a kind, thoughtful architect named Marcus, who I'd met through Aunt Marie. He knew my whole story, had listened without judgment, and never once made me feel like my past was a burden to overcome. I was happy. I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I'd never been in my first life. Caroline's criminal trial ended with a conviction. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, though she'd likely serve only 18 months with good behavior. Emma sent me a letter, forwarded through Mr. Patterson, apologizing for her part in everything, claiming she'd been manipulated by her mother, asking if we could ever reconcile. I read the letter once, then filed it away unanswered. Maybe Emma was sincere. Maybe she genuinely learned and grown. But I didn't owe her forgiveness. I didn't owe her anything. She'd had every opportunity to be kind to me, to treat me like family, and she'd chosen cruelty instead. That was on her. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. On the anniversary of my father's death, 7 years since I'd lost him in both lifetimes, I visited his grave. I brought flowers and sat on the grass next to his headstone, telling him everything that had happened. I got it back, Dad, I said quietly. Everything you meant for me to have. The house, the money, the future. I'm doing well. Better than well, actually. I'm happy. I hope you're proud. I could swear I felt a warmth on my shoulder, like a hand resting there in comfort and approval. I wish you were here, I continued. I wish you'd gotten to see me graduate, see the business I'm building, see the life I'm making, but I think maybe you are seeing it somehow. I think maybe that's why I got the second chance. Because you weren't done watching over me yet. The wind rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe it was his answer. I stayed for an hour, just sitting with him, feeling connected to his memory in a way that Caroline and Emma had tried to sever but never could. He was my father. He'd loved me. He'd provided for me. And I'd honored that love by refusing to let anyone take it away. When I finally stood to leave, I felt lighter. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it no longer crushed me. I'd survived his death twice now, and I'd come out stronger on the other side. 2 years after the rebirth, I sold the house. It wasn't an easy decision. The house represented everything I'd fought for, everything I'd reclaimed. But it was also filled with difficult memories, ghosts of both my first life and this one. And I'd come to realize that holding on to it out of spite or principle wasn't the same as actually wanting to live there. I sold it for $712,000. The market had been good, and I used the money to buy a beautiful modern condo downtown, closer to my office and to the life I was actively building, rather than the past I was holding on to. The new place was all windows and light, with a view of the city skyline that took my breath away every morning. It had 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for my home office, and space for the life I was creating on my own terms. Marcus helped me move, along with Jenna and Aunt Marie and a handful of friends I'd made through my business and my nonprofit work. We ate pizza and laughed and made jokes about my terrible packing skills, and it felt like a beginning rather than an ending. "This is perfect for you," Marcus said that evening, standing with me on the balcony as the sun set over the city. "It suits who you are now, not who you had to be to survive." He was right. The house had been about survival, about reclaiming what was taken. This condo was about living, about building something new and beautiful from the ashes of the past. "Thank you," I said, leaning into him, "for being here, for being patient while I figured all of this out." "You're worth the patience," he said simply, and kissed the top of my head. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and it was just me in my new space, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Emma. I'd ignored her previous letter, but something about the move, about this fresh start, made me want to offer one final piece of closure, not for her, but for myself. "Emma," I wrote, "I received your letter. I don't think we'll ever have a relationship, and I'm not interested in reconciliation. Too much damage was done, and I've moved on with my life without you in it. But I want you to know that I don't hate you. I don't spend my days thinking about revenge or wishing you ill. I simply don't think about you at all anymore. You're a chapter in my past, and I've turned the page. I hope you learn to be a better person than your mother raised you to be. I hope you find your own path to redemption and peace. But I won't be part of that journey. This is goodbye. Take care of yourself. Elizabeth." I read it over 3 times, making sure it said exactly what I meant. Nothing more, nothing less. Then I sent it before I could second-guess myself. Her response came 2 days later, short and seemingly sincere. "I understand. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy. Goodbye, Lizzie." And that was it. The final word on a relationship that had poisoned years of my life. It felt anticlimactic in the best possible way. Proof that they no longer had power over me, that I could grant final closure and walk away unscathed. 5 years after my rebirth, I stood in front of a room full of people at a conference on estate planning and inheritance protection. I'd been invited to speak about my experience, to share my story as a cautionary tale and an inspiration to others who'd been victimized by family financial abuse. "The thing about being reborn," I said, metaphorically, of course, I couldn't tell them the literal truth, "is that it gives you clarity. You see the truth of your situation without the fog of manipulation and gaslighting. You understand that you deserved better, that the abuse wasn't your fault, that you have the right to fight back." I looked out at the faces in the audience, young people, older people, all of them drawn by personal experience with inheritance theft and family betrayal. When I was 19 years old, I was told I had nothing. I was told I was lucky to have a roof over my head. I was told I owed everything to the woman who had married my father, even though my father had explicitly left his estate to me. I believed those lies because I was young and grieving and vulnerable. It took me years to understand that I'd been robbed, not just of money, but of my dignity, my confidence, my sense of self-worth. I clicked to the next slide, showing the headline from the news story about my case. But I fought back. I gathered evidence. I found allies. I used the legal system that exists specifically to protect people like us. And I won. Not just financially, though I did recover every penny that was stolen, but emotionally. I won back my life. I won back my future. And now I spend my time helping others do the same. The presentation lasted an hour, and afterward I was surrounded by people wanting to share their own stories, asking for advice, thanking me for speaking up. I gave out business cards for my nonprofit, made notes about follow-up consultations, and felt a deep sense of purpose that I'd never experienced in my first life. This was what I was meant to do. This was how I turned my suffering into something meaningful. That evening, Marcus and I had dinner at a rooftop restaurant, celebrating 5 years since the day everything changed. He'd become my partner in every sense. We'd moved in together 6 months ago, and there was a ring in his jacket pocket that I pretended not to know about, giving him time to plan the proposal he'd been nervously orchestrating for weeks. "You were amazing today," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "Watching you up there, so confident and powerful, helping all those people. I'm in awe of you, Lizzie. Of everything you've overcome and everything you've built. I couldn't have built it without support, I said. Without Jenna and Mr. Patterson and Aunt Marie and you, I didn't do this alone. No, he agreed, but you did the hard part. You made the choice to fight. Not everyone in your situation would have had that courage. I thought about my first life, about the me who'd given up, who'd accepted the lies, who'd died thinking she was worthless. I thought about the moment I'd woken up in my 19-year-old body with the impossible gift of a second chance. I almost didn't, I admitted. Fight, I mean. There were days when it would have been easier to just leave, to run away and start over somewhere else. But that would have meant letting them win, letting them keep what they'd stolen. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't let my father's memory be erased like that. I couldn't let their version of reality be the truth. I'm glad you didn't run, Marcus said softly. The world is better with you in it, fighting the good fight. We finished dinner as the sunset over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. My city, my life, my future. I was 27 years old and I had everything I'd ever wanted. Financial security, meaningful work, genuine relationships, and peace. I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and transformed it into purpose and power. Caroline was out of prison now, working a minimum wage job and still paying off her restitution debt. She'd be paying it for another decade at least. Emma had apparently gotten married to someone she'd met in whatever city she'd fled to. I'd heard through Aunt Marie, who still got occasional updates through mutual acquaintances. I hoped she was happy. I hoped she'd learned. But I didn't need to know. They were footnotes in my story now, not the main plot. On the 10th anniversary of my father's death, which, strangely, was also nearly 8 years since my rebirth, I went back to his grave one more time. I was 30 years old. I'd married Marcus 2 years earlier in a beautiful ceremony at a garden venue, surrounded by people who actually loved me. I was pregnant with my first child, a daughter I would name Diana after my father's mother. My business was thriving. My nonprofit had helped hundreds of people recover stolen inheritances. I'd written a book about my experience that had become a bestseller in the estate planning community. I'd lived more in this second chance than I'd ever imagined possible. Hey, Dad, I said, settling carefully onto the grass with my hand on my growing belly. It's been a while. I'm sorry I haven't visited more often. Life's been busy, but in a good way, I promise. I told him about Marcus, about the baby, about the book and the business and all the ways I'd taken the foundation he'd built for me and constructed a life worth living. I hope you're proud, I said. I hope you know that I never forgot what you taught me, about integrity, about standing up for what's right, about being strong even when the world is cruel. You taught me all of that, even if I forgot it for a while. Even if it took me a lifetime, 2 lifetimes, to really understand it. I placed flowers on his grave, yellow roses like the ones he used to bring home for me on my birthday. Your granddaughter is going to know all about you, I promised. I'm going to tell her how smart you were, how kind, how you worked hard to give me a future, how you loved me unconditionally, even though I only got 16 years with you. She's going to grow up knowing what real love looks like, what real family means. She's never going to doubt that she's worthy or valuable or deserving of good things. I'm going to make sure of that. The baby kicked against my hand as if in agreement, and I smiled through the tears that were finally falling. Thank you, I whispered, for everything you gave me, for the inheritance that let me rebuild my life, for the second chance I got somehow, some way to do things right, for loving me enough that even death couldn't sever that bond. I carry you with me every day, Dad, and I always will. I stayed for a long time, sitting in the sunshine, feeling connected to him across the veil of death and time and impossible rebirth. And when I finally stood to leave, I felt his presence one last time, a warmth, a reassurance, a gentle push forward into the life that was waiting for me. I walked back to my car where Marcus was waiting, patient as always, and he helped me into the passenger seat with careful concern for my growing belly. You okay? He asked. I'm perfect, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Let's go home. As we drove back through the city streets toward the life I'd built from ash and pain and impossible second chances, I thought about the girl I'd been in my first life, lost, abused, convinced of her own worthlessness. I thought about the young woman I'd been when I woke up 5 years in the past, armed with knowledge and determination and rage. And I thought about the woman I was now, survivor, fighter, entrepreneur, wife, soon to be mother, the woman who'd taken back everything that was stolen and built something beautiful from the ruins. They'd tried to destroy me. They'd tried to erase me. They'd tried to steal not just my inheritance, but my identity, my worth, my future. But I'd let them use my car for her trip only because I'd already bought my own apartment. I'd let them think they'd won only because I was 10 steps ahead, planning a victory they couldn't see coming. I'd been reborn, and I'd used that impossible gift to reclaim everything that was mine. And now I was finally, completely, triumphantly free.